After the Normans took control of England, London's skyline, often hidden by morning fog, witnessed a powerful change. In 1078, William the Conqueror made a bold move to solidify his hold over the land. He ordered the building of a massive fortress along the north bank of the River Thames. This fortress, known today as the Tower of London, was more than just a stronghold. It was a symbol meant to show the Norman rulers were now in charge. The local people of London were deeply affected by this construction. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle notes that many who were forced to help build the fortress felt heavily burdened by the king's demands. The centerpiece of the tower was the White Tower, a huge stone structure that rose high above the city. Its walls, built from local stone and reinforced with stone from Normandy, were incredibly thick and strong. Some walls were up to 15 feet wide and soared 90 feet tall. Its unique Norman design, with rounded arches and large pillars, made it stand out as a powerful and unyielding presence. The tower wasn't just a fortress. It was also a royal home and a place of worship. A bishop named Gundulf, known as the Builder Bishop, oversaw much of the work. He added smart defenses like a gate reachable by wooden stairs that could be removed during an attack. Inside, the Chapel of St. John was a masterpiece of Norman religious architecture and still survives today. Over time, the tower expanded. Different kings added their own touches. Richard the Lionheart began digging the moat in 1190, while his brother King John improved the defenses. But it was Henry III who truly transformed the tower into a royal palace. He built new towers with comfortable rooms decorated with paintings and tapestries. Royal records mention how, in 1236, Henry had the walls of the Queen's chamber painted with flowers and seasonal leaves. One of the more unusual features of the tower was its royal menagerie. Started in 1235, it held exotic animals, including a polar bear gifted by the King of Norway. This bear was known to be walked along the Thames on a long chain to fish for food, fascinating the Londoners who watched. The tower's role as a royal residence peaked in the Middle Ages, often hosting kings before their coronations and serving as a safe retreat during times of unrest. Edward I, nicknamed Longshanks, expanded the royal apartments and set up the Jewel House, where the crown jewels have been kept since 1303. These treasures include incredible gems like the famous Cullinan diamond, still the largest gem-quality diamond ever found. The imperial state crown alone sparkles with thousands of diamonds, pearls, sapphires, emeralds, and rubies. Not all stories were peaceful. In 1671, a daring thief named Colonel Thomas Blood nearly stole the crown jewels while disguised as a priest. When caught, he boldly told King Charles II he wanted to add England's crown to his list of achievements. Surprisingly, the king pardoned him and even gave him land in Ireland. Beyond royalty and jewels, the tower was a vital part of England's economy. From the late 1200s until 1810, it housed the royal mint where coins were made. Records from 1279 show millions of silver pennies struck there in just 1 year. The tower also held vast stores of weapons and armor, enough to equip thousands of soldiers. Master craftsmen like Jacob Holder, working in the late 1500s, created spectacular armor, including silver parade suits that were as valuable as luxury cars today. As political struggles increased, the tower shifted from royal home to prison. The first known prisoner was Ranulph Flambard, a bishop who escaped in 1101 by slipping down a rope hidden in a wine barrel. This daring escape led to tighter security, iron bars on windows, and more guards. Other prisoners, like the French poet Charles, who spent 25 years locked up, left behind poetry that still echoes the pain of captivity. The tower became infamous during the Wars of the Roses, serving as a place for prisoners accused of witchcraft and rebellion. The Salt Tower, built in the 1230s, was known for holding accused witches, while the Bell Tower became a gallery of prisoner graffiti, including a haunting carved name, Jane, thought to be by Lady Jane Grey's husband before their execution. One prisoner, Philip Howard, carved a message about suffering for Christ and the promise of future glory, showing how faith gave some strength in the darkest times. During the Peasants' Revolt in 1381, the tower served as a refuge for the young King Richard II when rebels stormed London. Centuries later, the tower's military importance soared during the English Civil War. In 1642, parliamentary forces took control, finding massive stores of arms and gunpowder inside. The royalist commander surrendered without a fight, leading a poet to mourn how the tower's sacred reputation had fallen to treason. Even in the 20th century, the tower kept its role as a symbol of British strength. Though damaged by German bombs during World War II, especially in the 1941 Blitz, it endured. One of the last prisoners was Rudolf Hess, Hitler's deputy, briefly held in 1941 before moving to military custody. The Tower of London stands today not just as a fortress, but as a storyteller of England's complex history, its power, its struggles, its legends, and its resilience. During the First World War, the Tower of London took on a grim new role. Within its ancient walls, 12 German spies met their fate, executed for their secret work against Britain. These were the last executions carried out inside the fortress. The final man to face the firing squad was Joseph Jacobs, who died in a small rifle range tucked inside a tower on August 15, 1941. The tower's long history of holding prisoners is well documented. Records from the 16th century show that important captives often received surprisingly comfortable treatment. High-ranking prisoners sometimes enjoyed the luxury of personal servants and fine food. For instance, when Elizabeth I was still a princess in 1554, she was allowed to stroll in the tower's gardens under close watch. Another notable prisoner, Walter Raleigh, was held for 13 years and set up an alchemy workshop right in his quarters, where he brewed his famous great cordial medicine. The tower also saw life enter its walls. According to historian John Stowe, one prisoner's child was born within the tower and given the nickname Carew, meaning tower in Welsh. The famous explorer imprisoned there once wrote a reflection on love and conscience, hinting at the complex human emotions held captive alongside the tower's walls. Adding to the tower's aura is the legend of the ravens. It is said that if the tower's ravens ever leave, the kingdom itself will fall. This superstition began during the reign of Charles II, who ordered at least 6 ravens be kept on the grounds to protect the realm. Today, 7 ravens, 6 plus a spare, live there under the care of a dedicated raven master. Each bird has a distinct personality and name. One famous raven, Jim Crow, lived at the tower for 44 years and even learned to bow and curtsy to visitors. Behind the scenes of the tower's history lies a darker profession, the executioners. These men, tasked with carrying out the kingdom's harshest punishments, often lived lives shadowed by fear and social isolation. Among them, Richard Brandon stands out. Known as the king's executioner during the 17th century, Brandon is infamous for beheading King Charles I in 1649. The deed haunted him until his death, with tales saying he confessed on his deathbed that the ghost of the king visited him in dreams. Brandon's role was not only dangerous but surprisingly lucrative. He received £30 for executing Charles I, a fortune at the time, roughly equivalent to thousands today, along with the king's cloak as a grim reward. Yet, executioners generally face social rejection, living apart from prisoners and guards alike. Records from 1593 reveal that executioners earned a yearly salary, plus extra payment per execution, with more paid for beheadings and hangings. One notorious executioner was John Jack Ketch, known for his clumsy, botched beheadings. His reputation spread far beyond the tower. His name became slang for any executioner. Ketch was often seen drinking alone at a nearby tavern, shunned even as he performed one of the most feared roles in England. The famous diarist Samuel Pepys noted that Ketch was so proud of his grim job, he even had his name displayed in gold letters above his door. Executing a noble or royal prisoner required great skill. The axe used weighed around 7 pounds and had a nearly 18-inch blade, demanding strength and precision. For those of higher rank, a sword was preferred, seen as a more honorable tool. One of the most famous sword executions was that of Boulin in 1536. A skilled French swordsman was brought in, and the king spared no expense to ensure her death was swift and clean. Witnesses said her lips were still moving in prayer as the blade fell. The scaffold where executions took place was itself a stage carefully designed to hold public attention. It stood about 15 feet high, so that crowds could witness the grim events. Lady Jane Grey's execution in 1554 drew thousands, with accounts describing her walking calmly to the scaffold, reading prayers from a book she carried. The execution block was made of solid oak, carved to cradle the neck securely. It was cleaned before each use and sometimes covered with straw to soak up the blood. The Tower Green, the spot for private executions, measured roughly 33 by 24 feet, with the scaffold placed to catch the morning sunlight. One of the most famous executions was that of Sir Thomas More in 1535. As dawn broke, More reportedly joked with his executioner, asking to be helped up the scaffold, but insisting he could manage his descent alone. The scaffolds themselves were built by skilled carpenters like Thomas Andrews, who worked at the tower between 1485 and 1509, ensuring the grim instruments of justice were sturdy and reliable. The tower's dark history extended even to the tiniest details, including how its execution platforms were built. Records show that each scaffold needed around 650 nails and 47 wooden planks, costing roughly 4 pounds at the time. Executioners, tasked with one of the most grim jobs in England, developed unique rituals to handle the weight of their work. Some sought forgiveness from those they were about to kill, while others drowned their nerves with heavy drinking the night before. Henry VII's executioner, who carried out the death of Catherine Howard, his fifth wife, reportedly practiced a swing on sheep carcasses to ensure a clean cut. Francis Threadkill, the executioner from 1485 to 1505, kept a detailed diary. He wrote of sleeping with his axe under his pillow and reciting prayers like, "Grant me strength to serve justice with mercy," before each execution. Superstitions ran deep among these men. Many kept a piece of the hanging rope for luck. William Marwood, a later executioner, believed the rope held mysterious power beyond death itself. The psychological toll was heavy. Thomas Derrick, who became an executioner after being pardoned for a crime, wrote in his diary how each night he saw the faces of those he had executed, the nobles and commoners alike. In the moments before the blade fell, Edward Dennis, executioner from 1593 to 1600, was known to seek peace through faith and nature. He attended church twice daily and cultivated a small garden of medicinal herbs to calm his troubled mind. After executing Robert Devereux, the Earl of Essex, Dennis suffered such deep depression that he took 3 months off, with his wife writing to the Privy Council about the heavy burden on his soul. Not every execution went smoothly. Margaret Pole, Countess of Salisbury, endured one of the most brutal deaths in Tower history. In 1541, at 67 years old, she refused to lay her head on the block. The inexperienced executioner chased her around the scaffold, striking her repeatedly, 11 blows in total, before ending her life. The trauma from this event was so severe that Alexander Burwell, the executioner, abandoned his grim profession and reportedly joined a monastery. Another infamous botched execution happened in 1645 when Ralph Griffin needed 4 strokes to behead Sir Alexander Carew. The crowd was so outraged that Griffin had to be escorted from the tower under armed guard. Poet John Taylor captured the horror of these moments, writing, "When death's dark servant trembles at his task, it is then the condemned must wear the executioner's mask." The final say in life and death rested with the monarch, and sometimes last-minute pardons led to dramatic scenes. In 1483, Sir James Tyrrell knelt at the block, axe raised, when a royal messenger arrived with pardon from Richard III, too late to stop the executioner's swing. The shock was said to have turned Tyrrell's hair white. Ironically, he later returned to the Tower himself as a prisoner, this time without reprieve, accused of involvement in the murder of the princes in the Tower. John Dudley, Duke of Northumberland, also faced a cruel twist in 1553. As he climbed the scaffold, a royal messenger brought news that seemed like a pardon, but was merely a delay so Dudley could watch his co-conspirator's execution. The Tower's chaplain, Hugh Latimer, recorded Dudley's grim words, "This day's delay is but to taste the bitterness of death twice over." Executioners followed strict rules. They often fasted before carrying out their grim duty and asked forgiveness from their victims beforehand. Between executions, the axe and block were covered in black cloth and carefully maintained. A 1597 inventory details multiple axes, swords, and blocks, along with instructions to sharpen blades on the finest stone and oil them with whale fat for a clean cut. William Rose Warden, executioner from 1566 to 1578, kept careful records of his tools. storing his axe in salt-packed leather to prevent rust. A handbook found in the Tower archives shows that executioners even tested their blades on pumpkins filled with red wine to mimic the feel of a human neck. The executioner's outfit was as much a symbol as a uniform. The black mask wasn't just for hiding identity, but represented death's impartiality. Their clothes were dark, often black or gray, with leather aprons to shield against blood. For royal executions, they might wear a special black velvet hood. Thomas Howard, appointed in 1600, recorded spending money on 2 fine leather masks, a velvet hood, and Spanish leather boots. Mary, Queen of Scots, gave her executioner a final request in 1587, asking him to dispatch me quickly and let your garment of black be my last sight in this world. Executioners didn't just oversee death. They handled the aftermath, disposing of bodies and managing personal effects. Some items, like clothing, were claimed by the executioner as part of their fee. After Walter Raleigh's execution in 1618, his executioner took Raleigh's velvet cloak and silk doublet. By 1600, the Tower had a detailed list of such perquisites. Rings and jewelry were returned to families, but clothes and other personal belongings were kept by the executioner, a grim reminder of the final journey those condemned made. This grim tradition led to a harsh custom. Condemned nobles were made to wear their poorest clothes at execution, so they would not enrich the man who took their life. Sir Thomas Wilson, lieutenant of the Tower, noted in his diary that nobles come to die in rags, though they lived in silk. Within the ancient walls where ravens still roam, some of England's most dramatic final moments unfolded. The Tower of London was a stage for power, betrayal, and sacrifice. As early as 1236, chronicler Matthew Paris wrote, "Many have entered, but few have left with their lives." The first known execution at the Tower was in 1242 when William de Marish was drawn and quartered for piracy and murder, a bloody precedent for centuries to come. Perhaps the most famous execution was that of Boleyn, Henry VIII's second queen, on May 19, 1536, after days of alternating between hysteria and calm, and walked to her death with a grace that many remarked upon. She spent her last days in the Queen's house, room 15, attended by 4 ladies, including Mary Kingston, the wife of the Tower's constable. Sir William Kingston sent detailed letters to Thomas Cromwell describing his behavior, including her dark joke about the executioner, saying she had a little neck and laughing heartily as she touched her throat. Even her enemies, like the Spanish ambassador Eustace Chapuis, acknowledged her courage, and his execution was unique, carried out by a skilled French swordsman specially brought from Calais, rather than the usual axe. This swordsman, Jean Rameau, had built a reputation across Europe for swift, precise decapitations. He arrived in London 3 days before the execution, staying near the Tower and reportedly practicing on sheep carcasses. Thomas Wyatt, a poet imprisoned in the bell tower at the time, watched his execution from his window. He later penned haunting lines reflecting the tragedy of those bloody days. Witnesses said the sword was so sharp and the strike so fast that Anne's head was severed before her lips finished moving in prayer. Just 18 years later, another queen met her fate on Tower Green, Lady Jane Grey, whose 9-day reign remains one of history's most tragic footnotes. On February 12, 1554, the 17-year-old was led to the scaffold, dressed in a black gown that cost 12 shillings, according to Tower expense records. John Feckenham, who tried to convert Jane to Catholicism during her last days, wrote that she spent her final hours reading from a small prayer book given to her by John Bridges, the Tower's lieutenant. This book, bound in black velvet and inscribed with her last message to her father, "You wish me to die, Father. You will meet your time of punishment," still exists today in the British Library. Italian merchant Baptista Spinola, present at the execution, marveled at Jane's peaceful appearance, writing that her calm surpassed all that a human being ever showed at the hour of death. Sir Thomas More's execution on July 6, 1535, marked another defining moment. After refusing to accept Henry VIII as head of the Church of England, More spent 14 months in the bell tower. There, he wrote his final works by candlelight on scraps of paper smuggled in by his daughter Margaret. Tower records show he was charged a penny a day for food and fuel, though his family could bring extra provisions. His cell, just 13 by 15 feet, with its original stone fireplace and toilet cubicle, can still be visited today. Spanish Ambassador Eustace Shopweis noted Moore's sharp wit even in captivity, recalling how Moore responded to his wife's pleas to yield to the king with firm, "Is not 20 years of life enough for you?" William Roper, Moore's son-in-law, recorded Moore's dark humor upon hearing his sentence was changed from hanging to beheading. "God forbid the king should use any more such mercy on any of my friends." One of the greatest mysteries of the Tower remains the fate of the princes. Edward V, aged 12, and his brother Richard, Duke of York, aged 9. Sir James Tyrrell, executed in 1502, confessed under torture to murdering the boys on Richard III's orders. He claimed they were suffocated with pillows and buried beneath a staircase. Chronicler Polydore Virgil wrote that the princes were last seen play with a ball in the Tower Gardens in August 1483, after which they vanished without a trace. The court physician, Dr. Argentine, was the last known person to see Edward V alive. The story of the Tower continued to unfold with the discovery of skeletons in 1674, believed to be those of the missing princes Edward V, aged 12, and his brother Richard, Duke of York, aged 9. Charles II ordered a marble tomb, designed by the famed architect Christopher Wren, to house their remains in Westminster Abbey. But in 1789, workers accidentally broke into this tomb and reported that the larger skeleton measured 4 feet 11 inches, matching Edward's estimated height at the time of his death. The place where someone was executed, Tower Hill or Tower Green, reflected the strict social order of medieval and Tudor England. Tower Hill, with its permanent scaffold standing 15 feet high, was built to hold crowds of up to 10,000 spectators. When followers of the rebel Jack Cade were executed there in 1450, the crowd was so large that several people were crushed to death. Tower Hill scaffold was maintained by the City of London at an annual cost of £4, recorded in city accounts. By contrast, Tower Green was a more private, somber spot where only a few hundred witnesses gathered. The Spanish ambassador described the execution of Catherine Howard in 1542 there, noting how the privacy made the event all the more terrible, as if death itself were whispering rather than shouting. The execution block on Tower Green was carefully crafted from solid English oak by John Ripley. A Tower carpenter paid 2 shillings for each new block he made. Lady Rochford, executed alongside Catherine Howard, reportedly fainted upon seeing the block and had to be revived with smelling salts before her own execution. Though Tower executions were rare, the Tower surgeon Thomas Vickery was paid 33 shillings and 4 pence to attend each, though his services were seldom needed. Diarist Edward Hall noted in 1542 that death at the Tower was most efficiently administered, a dark whisper carved in stone. As dusk falls and the last tourists leave, the Tower of London shifts from a historical site to a realm haunted by restless souls. Since 1078, these ancient stones have witnessed centuries of torture, execution, and political intrigue, creating one of Britain's most famous haunted places. The earliest recorded ghost sighting dates to 1817, when guard Edmund Lenhouse Swift reported encountering a mysterious bear in the Martin Tower. The shock of the encounter led to his death 2 days later. Tower physician Dr. James Morrison recorded Swift's last words, describing the apparition as not a trick of the light nor a fancy of the mind, but as real as the stones themselves. This event sparked the first official investigation into supernatural occurrences at the Tower, led by the architect Sir Robert Smirke, who documented 17 unexplained phenomena between 1817 and 1820 in a journal now held in the British Library. Perhaps the most famous ghost is Anne Boleyn. Her tragic death in 1536 is said to have bound her spirit to the Tower grounds. The first recorded sighting was by yeoman warder John Humphreys in 1864, who described her walking with a commanding presence she held in life, head held high despite the spectral detachment from her body. A detailed sighting in 1933 by Guard Captain Leonard Whitmore included Anne's entire execution procession, the French swordsman, her ladies-in-waiting, all moving across Tower Green at precisely 8 a.m., the exact time of her death. Shakespeare captured Anne's lingering presence in Henry VIII, writing, "After my death I wish no other herald, no other speaker of my living actions." Yet her spirit seems intent on reminding the living she remains. In 1976, Major General George Younghusband experienced a chilling encounter when the temperature inside the chapel suddenly plunged, frost forming on the walls. The chapel's logbook from that night recorded the temperature dropping from 68 degrees Fahrenheit to 35 degrees Fahrenheit in minutes. The tower's darkest mystery, the fate of the princes, has long fueled paranormal reports. Edward V and Richard of York vanished in 1483, but have been seen regularly by guards since. In 1953, guards Thomas Willoughby and Richard Howell reported sightings within 15 minutes of each other at exactly 3 a.m., describing the boys' embroidered nightshirts matching historical inventories. In 1990, visiting nun Catherine Morton took a famous photo of two shadows in the Bloody Tower window. Analysis by the British Paranormal Society and physicist Dr. James Henderson found unusual electromagnetic activity around the film, consistent with significant paranormal events. Lady Jane Grey's ghost has been one of the most frequently reported among the tower's restless spirits. So regular are her appearances on February 12th, the anniversary of her execution, that tower staff keep a special log just for sightings on that day. One memorable encounter in 1957 involved 23 visitors and 2 yeoman warders, including an American tourist named Margaret Beaufort, sharing a name with Henry VII's mother. In her travel diary, she wrote how the air thickened with sorrow, and through the mist, it felt as though history itself was bleeding before their eyes. Chief Yeoman Warder Arthur Crick detailed hearing distinct French prayers during these sightings. Lady Jane was known to have recited Psalm 51 in French just before her death. In 1998, Japanese tourists captured unexplained audio of a young woman reciting the same psalm in 16th century French, a recording later verified by Oxford linguists as matching the period's pronunciation. The supernatural presence extends beyond Lady Jane. The White Tower's medieval architect, Gundulph of Rochester, is said to appear during renovation work. In 2011, Mason James Harper reported detailed conversations with a Norman gentleman deeply concerned about mortar quality. In 1999, the Temperature Research Society, led by Dr. Elizabeth Chambers, investigated the tower's eerie phenomena. They found cold spots and electromagnetic surges that aligned precisely with historical execution sites. Dr. Chambers said, "The very air seems to remember." One chilling instance showed temperatures plunging from 20 degrees Celsius to -5 degrees Celsius in seconds at the spot where Margaret Pole met her end, accompanied by mysterious sounds matching descriptions of her execution. Walter Raleigh's ghost is so well known that guards affectionately call his former chamber Walt's study. During a 2018 Royal Society conference at the Tower, several physicists reported smelling tobacco smoke and hearing Latin mathematical formulas whispered in an empty room. Security cameras caught a pacing figure surrounded by strange lights, which Cambridge physics experts linked to theoretical models of spiritual energy. Raleigh's last words, "Strike, man, strike," are sometimes heard echoing to the Bloody Tower at dawn, most recently documented by Night Guard Stephen Matthews in December 2023. The Tower's supernatural tales reach even its lesser-known corners. The Salt Tower, where alchemist Henry Croft was imprisoned in 1590, often fills with the smell of sulfur and the sound of glass vials clinking. The stones there sometimes glow with an eerie blue light. The medieval palace once home to Henry III's polar bear, a gift from the King of Norway in 1252, is linked to phantom roars and mysterious claw marks appearing and disappearing on full moon nights. In 2020, motion sensors detected large animal movements in the empty space, prompting a week-long investigation by the palace's security team. The most recent documented haunting occurred in January 2024. A group of conservation workers renovating the Queen's house experienced a time slip, briefly finding themselves in the 16th century. They reported hearing period sounds, smelling Tudor air scents, and even glimpsing Catherine Howard running down a corridor, screaming for mercy just as she did before her execution in 1542. 5 workers witnessed the event, and their official report included details of Tudor furnishings later confirmed by historical records. Veteran yeoman warder John Kane, in his 2023 memoir, Guarding History's Ghosts in the Tower, reflected, "The past isn't just remembered here, it's still happening, layer upon layer, like pages of book that refuse to stay turned." The tower is a place where ghosts walk, and as centuries pass, these stories become woven into the very fabric of Britain's history. Once feared as a gateway to death, the tower now stands as a monument to those who lived and died within its walls, where time itself seems to pause. Thank you for joining this journey through the tower's secrets and shadows. Until next time, remember, history's voice never falls silent, and neither do the echoes that remain. Goodbye, and may the stories of the past inspire us all